Perhaps you've noticed some headlines talking about the commission lawsuit for residential realtors. It's been all over the news here in the last several months. So we want to go ahead and dive into this topic and let's take it head on. Let's discuss what agent commissions are, how we got to this point, and where we're going to go from here. I'm Robin Gerlach, along with my partner Reed Puser of the Roots Home Sales team at Compass Real Estate here in the Denver metro area of Colorado. We help folks like you looking to relocate here or who are already here looking to just move their property and their investments. So reach out to us if you have any questions, and don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time to the channel, and tap that bell so you're notified every time we put one of these videos out. And if you're not aware, here's what's going on. There has been a lawsuit. It started in 2019 with some home sellers in Kansas City, Missouri, who basically created a class action lawsuit saying that they didn't think it was fair as a home seller to be paying a buyer's agent commission because the buyer's agent is negotiating on the buyer's behalf and representing the buyer's best interest. So they didn't see that it was fair to be paying a buyer's agent commission and that being a requirement in the commission. So that's what started the lawsuit. This lawsuit was dropped. It was then picked back up by the Department of Justice in 2021, and it went to trial last October 2023. After a short deliberation, the jury found plaintiffs, basically defendants, were guilty, which the defendants in this case are National Association of Realtors and some large brokerages such as RE/MAX, Keller Williams, Compass, you name them. Some of the largest brokerages in the country were also named as defendants in this. So what just happened recently is National Association of Realtors came to a settlement agreement with the plaintiffs for paying out $1.4 billion and creating two rules. So the first rule is they will not put the buyer's agent co-op. Sellers cannot put buyer's agent commission on the MLS. That will no longer be a thing. So if I'm showing a buyer, I won't know what the seller is offering as a commission to me as a buyer's agent. That's rule number one. Rule number two, me as a buyer's agent, I have to have a written agreement with home buyers before I go out and show them properties. Those are the two requirements that have come through this settlement. Now, it's worth mentioning that this settlement hasn't been finalized. They're still hammering out the details. It has to be approved by a judge. Expectations are it will be approved. But that's a little bit of background of what's going on here. So I also want to go back and let's zoom out. Let's look at how did we get here up to 2019 when this lawsuit started in the real estate industry. National Association of Realtors started over 100 years ago. And this is at a time when folks were driving around, you'd see a for sale sign, and mainly realtors were there to help a seller sell their property. That's how realtors started. Okay, we were helping sellers sell their properties. Then fast forward to the 1960s. At that point in time, you have the creation of the MLS, which is the multiple listing service. Why did this come about? Well, when you have 3 or 4 different brokerages in a town that all have their own listings, a buyer wants to be able to see all of these listings instead of having to drive to all the different offices. So that was the creation of the multiple listing services, where all these brokerages could bring the listings into one platform and give it to the buyer. It used to be in a book instead of on Zillow. You could see all of this in a book. It would get printed out once or twice a month, and a buyer can go through and see what's available from all the different brokerages. Now, obviously, the creation of the internet has put all this information online, so every time a listing gets put into the local MLS, that gets syndicated out to Zillow, Redfin, and all of the other sites that home buyers are looking at properties. How did we get to buyer's agency? In the early 1990s, there were so many disenfranchised buyers by not being represented or not having accurate, good representation in their home purchase. They were often being misled, thinking that the sub-agent or the agent who was the assistant to the actual listing agent was helping them out, but that sub-agent was actually representing the seller. And so finally in the 1990s, buyer agency was born and created because of so many disenfranchised buyers. Now we had buyer's agents helping their buyer navigate the contract, navigate the process, getting the inspection, doing all of the due diligence that goes into purchasing a property. Thus, buyer's agents are here. Now, not all states have buyer agency. Some states have dual agency, which means one agent can represent both buyer and seller, which makes no sense to me. I think here in the state of Colorado, it's done properly, where you are either the agent representing the seller, the agent representing the buyer, or you're what's called a transaction broker, and you're just facilitating paperwork and not advocating for any party. So those are the three brokerage options here in Colorado, which really eliminates any kind of risk of having a conflict of interest in a real estate transaction, which is really important. So then in 2019, that's when this lawsuit started. It's worth noting in 2019, the market was pretty hot, and I think it's fair to say that sellers had a lot of leverage, and there was a pretty common perception that with all that leverage came the fact of, well, it's kind of easy to sell a home. You could put a sign up and buyers are gonna be coming and looking at the house. When the market's tough to sell a home, for example, 2008, 2009, we did not hear home sellers complaining about paying a buyer's agent commission. That only came when the market had what we call tailwinds, where the market was moving and there were more buyers than there were homes for sale. Looking at all of these factors, here's where we are today. Now moving forward, starting in mid-July is when this proposed settlement changes are going to take place. Me representing a home buyer going out to look at a property, I will not know if I'm going to be getting any commission from the seller. So it's going to be me calling the listing agent. Is there any offer of a commission for a buyer's agent to bring the buyer to buy the home? Okay, and there's going to be a lot more of these conversations. So every buyer's agent is going to have to negotiate for their commission essentially, or get their buyer to help out in paying the commission. So that's kind of where we're heading. There's going to be some complications coming from this, but buyer's agents are definitely going to have to be negotiating a lot more. I want to talk about a few misconceptions in the real estate industry as well. One, people say that a big part of this lawsuit was that commissions were fixed at 6% and they were not negotiable. That's a myth. Commissions are negotiable, excuse me. They always have been. Now, what hasn't been as negotiable is the buyer agent side, where if you want to put your listing in the MLS, you usually are required to offer some form of a co-op or commission to a buyer's agent. That's usually 2.5 to 2.8% here in the Denver metro area. Some markets are 3%. So that has always been kind of the non-negotiable perception part of the commission, and I think that's where this lawsuit came about. However, commissions have always been negotiable. There's flat fee models, companies that charge $5,000 to put your house on the MLS. You get what you pay for at the end of the day. Just like anything, if you're paying for a flat fee model, you're gonna get a flat fee service. So that means you might not be able to get hold of your agent on the weekend or a night when you have a question. Real estate transactions happen all hours of the day. We see negotiations for inspection go into the evening, go over the weekend, and so you want to make sure that you're paying a realtor who's giving you good service pretty much 24/7. So that's worth mentioning. There's another kind of misconception, I think, that sellers are paying the full commission. But you have to think about it. There is no commission and there are no proceeds from the deal if there's no home buyer and no bank. The buyer is paying the commission. It's baked into the purchase price. Without a home buyer coming to purchase that home, there's gonna be no commission being paid out, and there's gonna be no money to pay out a commission from. So it's not like sellers are paying out of their pocket for a listing agent to list their home. It only gets paid at closing upon successful sale of that property. So that's important to clarify, because a home buyer is the one that makes all of this work. If you don't have a buyer to buy your home, you're not paying any commission, okay? And so I wanted to clarify that because I think there's a lot of misconception that sellers are just having to offer and pay this commission out of pocket. You're not paying anything unless your house sells. Listing agents don't get paid, and a lot of times they're investing $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 into just putting your home on the market. But if that home doesn't sell, they're out that $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000. So that's important to remember as well. So let's go ahead and talk about where do we go from here. To be honest, none of us truly know where we're going to go from here with the commissions, because we don't know how sellers are going to perceive the value of a buyer's agent bringing a buyer. I want to just state where me and Reed and our team, our kind of stance on this is that when we're helping a seller sell their home, we would prefer to have a buyer who's represented by a competent buyer's agent, even if they got to get paid that commission, because there's so much liability in a real estate transaction that most lawsuits that come about in real estate are either from dual agency or unrepresented buyers. So if you have an unrepresented buyer, the chances or the likelihood of them feeling misled after closing on the home go up significantly. Okay, so when you have the buyer who has representation, someone who's advising them, counseling them, walking them through all their due diligence steps, they feel a lot more confident going to that closing table, less likely to have any kind of small claims court action, litigation post-closing. So me as a listing agent, I always tell my sellers, I prefer to work with a buyer who has buyer agent representation, because now we're sharing the liability in this transaction. And real estate transactions do carry a lot of liability. So that's going to be my conversation with sellers. I always think it's worth working with a buyer who has representation. There will be sellers who don't agree, and so that's going to open up these conversations for agents, sellers, and home buyers all throughout. There's a good thing. The good thing that's coming out of this is there's more transparency around how commissions work. And I say, let's talk about it as much as possible. If the more we get to demonstrate our value as realtors to you, the better. Okay, so that's a lot to take in, and hopefully you were able to gather some facts from this and not just sensational headlines. That's what we want to do. We want to give you not only value, but we want to give you substantial information that is going to impact you as a home buyer or a home seller. So if you have any questions about this, reach out to us, shoot us a text, give us a call, or send us an email, and we would love to dive into this and talk more about it. So we hope to hear from you, whether you're relocating here or making a move here within the Denver metro area. We would love to be the realtors helping you make that move. Reach out to us anytime. Until next time, take care.